Okay, good to see everyone today. Our portion this week is Noah, the second portion in the book of Genesis. Starts with chapter 6, and I want to look today at chapter 11. So, what's listed as the seventh Aliyah in the portion, page 58 in the Eitz Chaim, or chapter 11 of whatever Chumash you have. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So I pointed out last week about the portion Breshit, that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are really they read more like myth, like stories we're used to from Greek and Roman mythology, or even other ancient societies' origin stories. You know, things that are beyond belief, almost supernatural, that occur. People living to ungodly ages, 900 years and such, talking animals, things like that. So, it's just unusual and unique to the Torah, these first 11 chapters. Though I did mention there is slight reference in the book of Psalms and in Job and maybe in one or two prophets to some of this myth in terms of ancient sea creatures that were created by God, that God had to subdue in order to create creatures that we're used to in the world around us. So the idea that there's a Leviathan, this huge whale-like creature, there's reference to that in other books of the Bible, but it's one verse here and there. So as a story, these ancient stories are just here in these first 11 chapters. Starting in next week's portion, in Lech Lecha, we get more into what we're used to, a story of the Jewish people and the origin of the Jewish people. These 11 chapters are the origin of the world and answering some questions about why certain things are the way they are. So we're not going to look at the flood story today, the famous story of Noah and his family and pairs of animals going into the ark. We're very familiar with that, and that's also a bizarre story. Yes, we've seen flooding around, but not to the extent that the portion describes, and certainly not to the extent in which people have to go into a boat in order to save themselves and be the survivors of humanity. It's just fascinating that other ancient cultures have flood stories also. I mentioned last time about the ancient Sumerian myth with the hero named with a bizarre name. It's only bizarre because we don't know Sumerian. His name is Utnapishtim. So it's the Gilgamesh epic, and Utnapishtim is the survivor of the flood in that story. So scholars, biblical scholars especially, ancient Near East scholars, have written books and articles comparing and contrasting the flood story of Utnapishtim and Noah. And if you Google Noah versus Utnapishtim, you'll see the interesting compare and contrast of those stories. Okay, so I want to share a brief story today that makes it into this ancient Torah myth that is here at the very end of these 11 chapters, just the start of chapter 11, and it's only 9 sentences that we're going to read, and then I'll talk more about it. So we're on page 58. in Eitz Chaim, the start of chapter 11. So, in context, we have the children of Noah listed. Shem, Ham, and Yafet at the end of chapter 10. They're listed where they go, and each description of the descendants of each of the children is listed, like in verse 20 on page 57. Ele b'nei Ham, these are the children of Ham, lemishpachotam lilshonotam, according to their families and according to their languages. Be'artzotam begoyehem, in their land and their nations. Okay, so, and then the end of verse 32, end of verse 31, on page 58, Ele b'nei Shem, these are the children of Shem. By the way, anti-Semitism, Semite, from the name Shem. Okay, in Hebrew, anti-Semitism is called anti-Shemiyut. Okay, and some Hebrew words are really English words made to sound Hebrew. So anti-Semitism, anti-Shemiyut, Shem. So Semites are from Shem. Why it changes from the SH to the S, I don't know. So these are the children of Shem, according to their families and their languages, in their lands and their nations. Okay, now, so we get the idea. I didn't share with you that same line about Yafet, but it's the same line. Okay, Shem, Ham, and Yafet are the three children of Noah. We have their descendants listed here and how they spread out and developed languages and lived in different places. Chapter 11, I say that on purpose because of how chapter 11 starts. Vayehi kol haaretz safa echat udevarim achadim. There, at that time, so Vayehi, I translated here, at that time, the whole land or the whole earth was one language. Okay, now it's a different word, safa versus lashon. So verse 31, verse 20 told us, according to their languages, plural, and their families, plural. So at that time, the earth was one language. Okay, so red flags should be raised. Just 2 sentences before, we're told that there are lots of languages. Now you're telling us that there's one language, udevarim achadim. So I translate this as, and few words. It's translated here as same words. I'm not sure why the editors, they are biblical scholars, why they would translate this as same words, I don't know. Devarim achadim, in my mind, in my knowledge of Hebrew, means few words. Okay, so one language and few words, as opposed to many languages existing already. But for our story, all right, so the story is being inserted here with a different kind of context being provided for us. So just keep this in mind. Let's read the whole story, and then I'll go through it verse by verse. Vayehi ben nosam mikedem vayimtzeu vik'a be'eretz shinar vayeshvu sham. When they were traveling or wandering or walking from the east, they found a valley. It's just very interesting. Israel is operating now in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. And I'm wondering, Bek'ah in Arabic, does it mean the same word in the Hebrew as Bik'ah here? Just interesting to me. And then it would be redundant. The Bek'ah Valley would be the valley. So just saying. So they found a valley in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. Vayomru, Ish el Reyehu. One said to the other, that is, the people who were speaking one language in few words, who settled in that valley in Shinar, they said one to the other, Hava nilbina levenim, v'nisrefa l'serefa, v'tehi lahem halevena la'aven, v'hachemar haya lahem chomer, lachomer. So they said one to the other, let's make bricks and burn them, which probably means harden them in an oven in some way, in fire. Okay, so it's just this story's way of telling us how brick making came into being. Brick making came into being when one to the other said, let's make bricks. Okay, if only it was that easy. Let's find a cure for Alzheimer's. Poof, and we find the cure for Alzheimer's. Let's make bricks. Poof, we'll burn them in the oven. We make bricks. So clearly a bizarre way to tell a story about how bricks were fashioned. So just the story to say, they figured out how to make bricks. And so they had, the bricks were hard as stone, and the bitumen became mortar. Okay, so this is how bricks and mortar came into being at that time. Whatever time it was, when the time of one language and few words, among the few words that they had was brick and mortar. 4. Vayomru. Hava nivne lanu ir. Umigdal verosho bashamayim. V'na'aseh lanu shem pen nafutz al penei kol haaretz. So they said, let's build us a city and a tower whose top will be in the sky. And we will make for ourselves a name. We'll become famous, lest we spread out over all the earth. In other words, they're all living together in this valley. Hey, let's stay together in this valley by building a city. Because if we don't build a city, then we'll all be spreading out. So not only should we build a city, let's build a tower whose top will be in the sky. How tall does this tower have to be for it to be in the sky? Don't know. But it could be understood as heaven. So if they want the top of it to reach the heaven, then that's a long way to go. So the word shamayim can be translated as sky or can be translated as heaven. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, our Father who art in heaven. That's what that means. Christian prayers start that way. Hebrew prayers could start Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. Sur Yisrael v'go'alo. Right? The prayer for Israel starts that way. Avinu, Avinu, Shabbat Shamayim, Sur Yisrael v'go'alo. All right? Our Father who art in heaven, rock and redeemer of the people of Israel. Okay? Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. So, our Father not in the sky, our Father in heaven. Okay? But sky, the word for sky is also Shamayim. So up there, above us. What do they mean here? We don't know. Do they mean heaven? Do they mean sky? So let's build this tower. Let's build a city. Let's build a tower. Because if we don't build it, No, we will build it so that we establish a name for ourselves and we prevent people from spreading out. So we'll have plenty of room for people to live here. Okay? 5. Doesn't seem like anything's wrong with this. It's just providing an origin story for where cities came into being and where tall buildings came into being. At this time, how tall were buildings? 3 stories high? I mean, even if you built them out of brick, how many stories can you have in a building based on the engineering that they have then? Well, yes, they had the pyramids. Okay, so they had a pyramid. And at this time, we'll look at the commentary soon, they had the Babylonian equivalent to a pyramid was a ziggurat. If you Google that, you'll see a picture. Kind of like a Mayan or an Incan pyramid. So if you've ever been to Mexico or other countries in Central America and gone to pyramids there, the pyramids there look like the pyramids of Egypt, except they have like steps coming down one or two of the sides. So imagine the pyramids with steps going up the entire side. That's what a Mayan or an Incan pyramid looks like. Okay? And that's what a ziggurat looks like also. Scholars then have a field day. How did the Mayans know the Babylonians? Did the Babylonians know the Mayans? And then you get and then the mountain drawings that they have in Peru. Does that mean aliens came to the earth? I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that it's just interesting. If you Google images ziggurat and then images Mayan or Incan pyramids, they look remarkably similar. Okay, so maybe that's the kind of tower that's being referred to here, this kind of pyramid tower. We don't know. Migdal is a biblical word because it's right here, but it's also the modern Hebrew word. It's used in modern Israel. Like the skyscraper in Israel, when I first visited Israel 50 years ago, was the Shalom Tower in Tel Aviv. So it's a nice office building now. Well, not so nice, maybe. It's not in a great part of town anymore. But it's called Migdal Shalom, the Shalom Tower. Okay, so I only bring it up just because it's called Migdal. So this ancient biblical word is still used in modern Hebrew language. It means tower. Okay, 5. Vayered, so again, we don't know if anything's wrong with this. Vayered Adonai lirot et ha'ir ve'et hamigdal asher banu b'nei ha'adam. So God came down to see the city and the tower that the sons of Adam, or people, however you want to translate that, they are literally the sons of Adam. They're his descendants, but they're also, you could also say people. They wanted to see what the people built. Okay, is this a bad thing or a good thing? We don't know. There's no there's no judgment involved. God came down. Is it a good thing he came down? Bad thing he came down? We don't know. 6. Vayomer Adonai, Hein am echad, v'safa achat lekulam, v'zeh hachilam la'asot, v'ata lo yibatzer mehem, kol asher yazmu la'asot. So the Hebrew is a little bit cryptic. Let's give it a try. God said, right, God came down. God said, after seeing what they had built, yes, surely they are one people and one language, and they have one language, and this is how they've begun to act. This is how they've begun to act. So one people, one language has prompted them to build a city and a tower. And now, lo yibatzer lahem, then nothing that, so lo yibatzer mehem means then nothing that they may propose to do will be out of their reach. So lo yibatzer mehem means not in their reach. Kol asher yazmu la'asot, anything they dare or try to initiate, everything they try to initiate will not be out of their reach. Okay, so in other words, look what they've been able to accomplish by living together. Now, because of that, nothing can be out of their reach. They could do anything. So 7, so as a result, Hava nerda vinavla sham sifatam, asher lo yishmeu ish sifat re'ehu. Let's go down. God's talking in the plural. So just like God talked in the plural in chapter 1 or chapter 2, saying, let's create a human in our image. So God talks in the plural in chapter 1 also. God's talking in the plural now. All right, so let's go down and confound their speech so that they cannot hear the language, meaning they cannot understand the language of his fellow. So, because nothing can be out of reach of humanity, let's confound them by creating different languages to make it harder for them to reach their goals, because they're not going to be able to understand each other. 8. Vayafetz Adonai otam misham al penei kol haaretz, vayachdilu livnot ha'ir. And God spread them out from there. So, in other words, the people said, let's build a city and a tower so that we won't spread out. 8 says, God spread them out from there on the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Now, they didn't stop building the tower, they stopped building the city. All right, so we're told they wanted to build a tower, a city and a tower, and now the city stops. So I guess we have to assume that the tower stops too, because the tower is in the city. 9, I'm just pointing out that we're missing the word tower. 9, Al Kain Kara Shema Babel, Kisham Balal Adonai Sifat Kol Haaretz, Umisham Hefitzam Adonai Al Penei Kol Haaretz. Therefore, its name was called Babel or Babel. It's like the language software, how to learn new languages. Babel, it's for a reason from this, because languages were created here. Okay, so therefore we called its name was called Babel, because there God Balal. So making a double lamed there from the Babel, God confounded the speech of the earth, and from there God spread them out on the face of all the earth. Okay, so that's the story. That's the story. Before we look at the commentary, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong that's happening here. God isn't, go ahead, Sumner. You have to unmute. You have to unmute.
Excuse me. Why did God confound them? Why did
Why
he?
did they? Right, so we don't know. The story is cryptic, and that's what I'm asking. So, but just by reading the story, it doesn't seem like anything is wrong. It's another one of these stories to explain why things are the way they are. In the Garden of Eden story that we read last week, there is something wrong. This snake is enticing the woman to eat from the tree that God commanded not to be eaten. So we have a story there of going against God's word. And as a result, things happen. Because of that, the snake doesn't have legs anymore. The woman is going to be all women from then on will have pain in childbirth, and all men from then on will have to work for a living. Okay, so why do men work for a living? Why do women have pain in childbirth? And why do snakes slither on the ground? Because of the story of the Garden of Eden. Okay, so but there's judgment, or at least there's a reason for why those things happen. Here, there's no judgment about, we're not told that that was a bad thing that the people wanted to build a city and a tower. It just said they did. Or we only know that having one language together and few words, despite that, or just another descriptor for us to understand that there were people who spoke one language and had few words in that language, and from that they were able to make bricks and mortar and have the idea to build a city and build a tower up in the sky or to the heavens. So again, depending on how we translate the word shamayim, is their goal spiritual, or is their goal like, look at what we can accomplish because look how high the tower is going? We don't know. We don't know why they wanted to do it. So the commentaries provide, there's a lot of midrash about it. So this generation of the descendants of Noah and the Tower of Babel story is called Dur HaHaflaga, the spreading out generation. And the spreading out is seen as punishment for the Tower of Babel. In Midrash, the Tower of Babel is not seen to be a good thing. And so let's look at below the line to understand that and see why the rabbis are coming up with such a negative story. Okay? So just one second here. Okay. So below the line on page 58, commanded to disperse and settle the earth, Noah's descendants insist on clustering in one area. Now, insist. There's no insisting here. In chapter 11, they traveled. Verse 2. They traveled eastward, and they found a valley in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. There's no insisting. They weren't forcing people. And even when building the city, let's build the city so that people don't disperse. There's no insisting there. It's just an idea. Okay, so even our commentary, just by saying insist, is adding some kind of judgment. Okay? Commanded to submit to the will of God, they set out to make a name for themselves. Right? So, in other words, there's a covenant that God established with Noah and his descendants back in chapter 9 and 10 when they leave the ark. So that's the covenant. Yes, we have to, there is a basic covenant, and this is the covenant of the 7 laws of the children of Noah. Okay, so Jews have 613 commandments. The rest of humanity has 7. There are 7 basic moral principles. Okay, and we could just look at, just one second here. Where is it? It's somewhere on page 50. It is in chapter 9. It says what these 7 laws are. Okay, so that's the covenant. That and among the based in the covenant is belief in God. Okay, to submit to the will of God, they set out to make a name for themselves. The story of the Tower of Babel, the commentary proceeds, seems inspired by the Babylonian temple towers, or ziggurats. Maybe. We don't know. We really don't know. This is biblical commentary speaking. If understanding Shamayim as heaven, which implies where the gods live. Okay, that's what heaven implies when you say heaven, as opposed to saying sky, or based on our knowledge now, we would say outer space. I mean, in biblical times, they had no idea what outer space meant. It just meant sky. They knew sky, but if they said heaven, then they're assuming that there's gods up there. Like, who put the stars there? How does it get dark? Where does the sun go? Where does the moon go? Right? It's just traditional among ancient peoples that the gods make things happen in the sky up there. Somebody's moving a curtain, and the day curtain goes away and the night curtain comes out. And this is what it looks like. Even in our prayer book, in the evening service, Ma'avir Yom Umevi Laila, God makes the day go away and brings the night. So there's and kind of like there's this idea that God is rolling the sun away and making the moon come out. So just these ancient ideas here. Okay, so it might be, I would say, the story of the Tower of Babel might be inspired by the Babylonian temple towers. That's how I would read the below the line. Can we sense here the Torah's ambivalence about large cities? I don't know. God doesn't like it. God, yes. So God says, nothing will be before. Nothing could be out of reach to them. So let's make it a little bit harder by creating lots of languages and spreading them out over the face of the earth. Okay, so we've seen throughout the centuries how hard it is for different peoples to form alliances and to trust each other and to do things together, right? We know that. So yeah, it's remarkable that the League of Nations was founded after World War I and transformed into the United Nations, but is that really a unified body that all countries in the world agree to everything the United Nations says? Absolutely not. Just look at the law that the Knesset passed yesterday, prohibiting the United Nations Refugee Relief Organization from operating in Israel. It's a whole other question. Maybe we can discuss it on Jews in the News, but clearly Israel doesn't like the work of the United Nations. And I'll just say, many of the UNRWA, as what it's called, UNRWA, UNRWA, many of the UNRWA employees have been found to be Hamas terrorists. Okay, so there's a reason why Israel passed that law, because if the United Nations is supposed to be an independent organization and completely neutral so that everybody can trust it, then clearly they're not, if their employees are allowed to be members of the Hamas terrorist organization. Okay, so anyway, the story, one lesson of the story is, how did we come up, how do we come to be a world of different languages and different peoples, and why are we spread out all over the world? Because when we were together as one people, we tried to build a city and a tower, and God made us spread out, because God thought then maybe things would get out of control. It doesn't mean, we don't know, out of control for bad, like we would use the unity of the one language for bad purposes. It doesn't say. We know that from the start of this portion, in which people have been corrupt on the face of the earth. So maybe we can apply that to this story, but we don't know from this story if it's really referring to that or not. Okay, I can't emphasize enough that the commentary is really coming up with reasons that are not necessarily there in the text itself. Okay, so can we sense here the Torah's ambivalence about large cities with the anonymity, crime, and lack of neighborliness they represent? We don't know that that's what's happening in this story, or its suspicion that technology, the celebration of human ingenuity, will often lead to idolatry, people worshiping the work of their own hands. We don't know that either. Now, they do say we want to make a name for ourselves. Okay, so that's the only thing we can say. Maybe these people are being egotistical. But is that human beings want to make names for themselves, right? There are lots of hospitals and university buildings and synagogues and schools that have people's names on them, right? It's the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School for a reason. It's the I don't know, Robert H. Smith Business School at the University of Maryland. It's Johns Hopkins University, etc., etc. Okay? So, is that a bad thing that you want your name on a building? Don't know. Certainly it leads to greed, but is that a bad thing? That, like the Bloomberg School of Public Policy at Hopkins University, all the money that Bloomberg has given to historically black colleges too, and supporting, if you use your money for philanthropic good things, it's a good thing to have your name on something. So I don't know. Again, these questions that our commentary is asking is based on this cryptic story that doesn't necessarily lend itself to this kind of understanding. But this has been the understanding of this story for the commentaries immediately think that there's something bad going on and ascribe ill will to the people who are building the city and the tower. So let's go on the right-hand side below the line on 58. One writer distinguishes between mountain cultures, which see the heart of the world in wilderness, revering nature and adapting to it, and tower cultures, for whom the essence of the world is the city and the human-made environment, stripping the sense of awe from nature and attaching it to the social and technological order. Okay, you can anthropologists and sociologists can have a field day with what cities look like and building skyscrapers versus living outdoors off the grid. Comparing an off the grid person living in the wild in Alaska versus the architects of major firms in Manhattan. Okay, two very different kind of people. Egypt, land of pyramids and treasure cities, will be a tower culture. Israel, from Mount Sinai to the Temple Mount, will be largely a mountain culture. Okay, so that's an interesting take on the distinction between Egypt and Israel. And Egypt, if I've never been to Luxor, I haven't been to the pyramids, but I've seen pictures. And so cities like Luxor, the Valley of the Kings, whatnot, and then the pyramids themselves in northern Egypt, they represent a particular kind of what the culture has in mind of building these monuments. Whereas Israel is about having mountains to commune with God and to become a spiritual people. So, the people of the Tower of Babel are a preeminent example of a tower culture. Although human beings have done many wonderful things to reshape their environment, there's always the danger, now we're on 59, below the line, of becoming so enamored of technology that human values are lost. Okay, so it's reading a lot into this story, that the story is talking about tower culture versus nature. So I don't know. So can we understand that God then doesn't like tower cultures and God wants us to commune with nature? Is that what we're supposed to learn from the story? Maybe. I'm just not sure. A rabbinic legend relates that people paid no mind if a worker on the tower fell to his death. If a brick fell, however, they lamented the delay in their building project. Okay, so there's this story too. How to make sense of how to understand God coming down and causing them to start speaking different languages. So for the rabbis, they see it definitely as a punishment. They would have seen, apparently for the rabbis, it would be a blessing if we all spoke the same language. But clearly it's a punishment for the rabbis. So why were they punished? What were they doing so wrong? Okay, so maybe they were being mean while they're building. And they say that building is more important than anything else. So important that while we're building, if somebody falls off the scaffold, nobody cares. We only care that the building gets built. That's the midrash that this is referring to. They lamented if a brick fell out of place, as opposed to lamenting a person getting injured or falling to his death in the process of the building. So you could just, there's plenty of midrash about that. The purpose of these awe-inspiring monuments erected by the technical skill of men was to enable people to forget their insignificance and transient nature. Okay, so Nachama Leibowitz, a scholar, a woman scholar in the 70s and 80s in Israel, an important thinker and scholar, has that to say about this story too. So again, this cryptic story providing to us immediately a sense that there's something bad that happened here. You know, it's kind of like the Garden of Eden story that we read last week, and how Christians automatically understand that as original sin. So Jews don't go that far. Yeah, the Adam and Eve and the snake ate of the tree, and they had that punishment, or those punishments meted out by God against them. But it's not what we call original sin that we then, according to Christianity, have to overcome throughout our religious life. So, but that's how they read it, and that's how they automatically read it. So the rabbis automatically read the Tower of Babel as a story pointing out the narcissism of humanity, and and how the goal to focus on yourself and try to build monuments to yourself is an ill-fated goal. And the punishment that we're trying to overcome is this idea of being spread out over the face of the earth. So I wanted to share this today just for us to understand how Midrash sometimes will take a story completely out of context, from whatever context it is, and attach new meanings to it so that we can't help, if we are brought up in this Jewish tradition, having read the Midrash, we can't help but read the story in the way the rabbis are reading the story. And it's hard for us to take off the rabbinic lens and read the story straightforward. And if we read it straightforward, we see, fascinating how the rabbis decided to interpret the story. Thoughts or comments about this? So that's what I wanted to share today. I hope everybody has a good rest of the day, and see you all next Wednesday. Have a good rest of the week.